Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, it is one of my favorite sort of, I don't know if we can call it tradition. We've really only done it once, but it is our sort of cram where, okay, the test is coming up in just a couple of days and turns out we've forgotten to go to class all year, maybe accidentally walked by the classroom once. It's like, all right, what's on the final exam? I don't know. Ohio State has to play Tennessee in a little over a week and a half. And confession time, we're generally pretty busy on college football Saturday, so we don't get to watch a ton of Tennessee. So now we get to cram for the final exam, and lucky you get to copy off of our papers.
You know, it's about 10 years ago when I finally stopped having the dreams about final exams are here and you have not gone to class at all. And it's like, why did I even re-enroll? Like, what am I doing going back to school and then not going to school at all? And now I've got this test. Like this is a bad decision. But this, Tom, well, this game was also a bad decision. Alabama versus Tennessee is what we're talking about. That's the first game that we rewatched or watched. It was the 7th game of the season for both teams. Not a September 1st, getting the kinks out. This was a middle of October game that third Saturday in October, in fact, as it always is. And this was one of the sloppiest games I've seen all year. And we just watched Ohio State, Michigan not too long ago.
Yeah, I think we have to start with, and generally the whole point of this obviously is, okay, what does Tennessee look like playing a good opponent? And we always try and do, here's a game they won and they looked pretty good. Here's a game they lost and they looked terrible. And you sort of start to narrow in, okay, what is this team really and how good could they be and how bad can they be and what's that going to mean for the upcoming playoff game? I know the officials are not going to be the same for the playoff game, but I think we need to start with the penalty numbers from this game.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama, 15 penalties, 115 yards. Tennessee, 11 penalties, 95 yards. Both teams threw for just slightly over, the starting quarterbacks threw for just slightly over 50% completions. This was, Tony, the dumpster, she is a flame. That was this game. There's plenty to learn from it, and there's going to be lots of stuff to talk about, but it was long. It was sloppy. It was really disjointed. It was just, I had watched the Tennessee-Georgia game, so I thought, hey, I kind of know, because that was a week that Ohio State was off, so we'll get to that one in the next show, but I had watched that one live. This one I had just sort of, maybe we listened to this in the car or something. I don't remember, but it was just like, oh boy, this was a hot mess.
Yeah. A long, sloppy, hot mess, disjointed. You have described trying to eat a foot-long coney dog from Sonic in the car while driving, basically. That's what this game was. And Tennessee did, in fact, go ahead and win it 24-17, got up 7-0. And then, basically it was a one-score game throughout the course of the game when it wasn't tied. And so it was close throughout. And it was a game that could have gone either way. At times you felt a little like Tennessee was fortunate that it did go their way. As an aside, if I'm an Alabama fan, being a fan of Jalen Milroe, it would just be like frustrating and infuriating because he is such a problem in terms of that entire offense, whether it's tempo or a salary count or getting a snap or because both offensive lines were pretty disjointed in this one. And the defensive lines were kind of the same way in that they weren't always set. There's always something going on. It just seemed like a lot of chaos overall in this game on the line of scrimmage. And you saw, offsides penalties, you saw holdings and things like that. But it was not a pleasing game. Like, it took me almost 2 hours to rewatch. And this is fast forwarding on YouTube and things like that. And there was a lot to take in. I think, Tom, I'll say this. The first thing I want to talk about, after we've already talked about all of this, is Will Brooks, Tennessee safety, number 35, a former walk-on, a finalist, I believe, for the Burlsworth Trophy, which is the best of walk-on or former walk-on in college football. And I was really impressed with him in this game. He had a couple of touchdown saving tackles, including one on Jalen Milrow on like a 3rd and short or 4th and short that Milrow busted through and got ankle tackled by Brooks. And he comes off the edge a little. He reminded me of another former walk-on who would make plays in the backfield as a safety. Tom, you will remember this name, Jordan Kovacs, but he's better than Kovacs. And he also had the game-sealing interception in this one. And so I was impressed with him. We'll talk about him in the next show about his game against Georgia, because it was a different kind of game than this one, but I thought he did pretty good in this one.
Yeah, and this is why we watch multiple games, because sometimes it's like, wow, this guy's amazing. And then you watch another game and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he has his moments. He definitely is not the pile jumper that Jordan Kovacs was. I just remember former Michigan safety, former walk-on in the mid-2000s or so. And he would always get himself half a tackle by jumping on the pile. That was my biggest memory from Jordan Kovacs. But yeah, he was very, very good in this game. And you looked at it and you was like, oh boy, they've got someone. And then I have another safety note here. Andre Turrentine, Ohio State fans will remember. Speaking of safeties, Ohio State fans may remember. He was at Ohio State for 1 year. I completely forgot that he was on the Tennessee team. He really didn't play much at Ohio State and transferred after 1 year, so he just didn't leave much of an impression. But he's turned into a solid safety. You will see him wearing number 2 for Tennessee in the backfield. I think he had 4 tackles in this game. So yeah, so there's now we've talked about Tennessee's safeties. I wanted to talk, Tony, about Tennessee's corners, because Jermod McCoy, number 3, he is a Oregon State transfer, I believe. Definitely their best corner. Sometimes you can just sort of, it doesn't usually take long to watch a team and go, that's their number 1 corner. And you can sort of watch, you look, and then you check the stats, and it's like, yes, he is also the one who leads them in interceptions and PBUs. He had 4 picks, 9 pass breakups this season. He picked off Jalen Milrow in the end zone, ran it back past midfield, kind of early in the game. Speaking of Jalen Milrow driving people crazy. But he also was very consistent, big hitter. I'm going to guess he's the guy that Tennessee's going to try and throw on Jeremiah Smith as often as humanly possible, because he was on Ryan Williams a bunch in the Alabama game. He had a big hit on Ryan Williams at one point. He had the interception was when he was covering Ryan Williams in the end zone. And Alabama doesn't have the breadth or depth of wide receiver core that Ohio State does, where it's kind of Ryan Williams and then also some guys. It's, the Gilligan's Island and the rest. That's the Alabama wide receiver core this year. They don't have an Emeka Egbuka or a Carnell Tate. And, I think McCoy, to me, I look at him and I'm like, he's the guy who don't necessarily, he's not the guy you're going to try and pick on. You're going to want to go somewhere else. We can talk about where else you want to go, because it also did not take me long to figure out, okay, who are people going to try and pick on? There's another Tennessee corner that it feels like is probably where you're looking, where the game plan is leading you. But McCoy, probably not the guy you want to be throwing at too often.
Yeah, McCoy that interception was a one-handed grab, basically stabbed it away from Ryan Williams, who incredibly in this game, 19 targets, just 8 catches for 73 yards. They did a fantastic job on him. And some of the times when he was open, and he did get open, the throws weren't there and they were behind and too high. And Milrow was all over the place in this one, 25 and 45, 2 interceptions. You got that guy throwing 45 times, and you're asking for a lot of incompletions and a lot of wasted downs, basically. But that's also part of the ability of Tennessee to stop the run, which we'll get into here in a sec. You want to talk about the other guy that they're going to throw at here? I assume you're talking about number 1, Ricky Gibson, the other starting corner. And then they also will roll in number 6, Jalen McMurray, and get after him a little bit as well. But yeah, like Ricky Gibson is the guy that you would go after. But also, Ohio State will attack whomever. And some of these, sometimes the coverage is way off. They did do some pressing, so I think you just have to pick and choose where you want to go and what you want to do with them. Let's see, what do I want to talk about, Tom? Let's talk about I think tempo would be a good idea against this Tennessee defense because they were having some issues getting set. And it's strange because I'm sure they see it all the time in practice. But I do think that tempo for Ohio State would be good. But then I continue to go back and say, but also is that going to cost your own defense an opportunity to get some rest? But you did see some success against Tennessee for Alabama when they did some tempo. And they will rotate. Tennessee rotates. They've got some decent athletes in the front with James Pierce and Joshua Josephs, who sometimes they're the Leo, the stand-up rush edge, and sometimes there'll just be one of them out there. Other times there'll be two out there when they go with like a 3-4 type of alignment. They have both of those guys on opposite edges. So those are your two sack leaders, your two tackle for loss leaders, I believe, tackles for loss, certainly. And they make some issues, but overall, I think you keep them out there as much as possible in terms of the tempo, and you try to just keep the defense that you want out there and keep them from getting set because they're constantly moving around. They do some late shifts. And if you're moving faster than they are, those late shifts can't really happen, and they can't screw over your offensive line because they will try to do some different movement and things like that. So kind of beat them to the punch. I think that might be something to watch, but we have not seen a lot of tempo from Ohio State this year.
No, but this is an opportunity to, with the way Alabama used it, and spoiler alert, Georgia uses tempo as well. It feels like a lot of teams have figured out that's a way to sort of counter what Tennessee wants to do. It's a little bit like the 2020 season when Ohio State had played Clemson the year before and lost in the Fiesta Bowl, and then they got Clemson again in the Sugar Bowl, and they were using tempo. And this is, you're solving a different problem here, but this was Brent Venables, and was it Brent Venables stealing signs, or was it something else? But Brent Venables sending signals in late, let's say. Mm-hmm. And so if you then go tempo, then they're not set. It's kind of the same thing. If Tennessee wants to move around and sort of confuse you right before the snap, that's great. But if you're standing up and you're moving around and you're not set yet, that's a great way to get blown off the ball if the opponent starts things early. So yeah, I think this is one. I mean, Ryan Day's been complaining all year about not getting enough snaps. Well, mm-hmm. If both teams run tempo, you might get a whole lot of snaps in this game. James Pierce, you mentioned, I had written down, he's a guy you notice a lot, and a lot like McCoy. I had him written down, and I went back and looked later. It's like, oh yeah, look, he led the team in sacks, 7.5. How about that? 10 QB hurries. Yeah, how about that? Just jumps off the screen as someone that Ohio State's going to have to figure out a plan for. He lined up over right tackle a bunch, so that might be Josh Fryer's problem. We'll see. But just Tennessee's pass rush on the whole just really teed off on the Alabama offensive line. Alabama only ran for 2.2 yards per carry in this game. And when Alabama got themselves into predictable spots, mm-hmm. whether it was 3rd and long and, an obvious passing play, or Alabama ran the play clock down a bunch so that, the play clock goes from 1 to 0. Guess what? When they're snapping the ball, or they're not, or they're going to take a delay a game. Got a lot of good jumps there. They forced holding calls. They got Jalen Milroe just kind of off platform, just out of rhythm. It was really a bigger impact to me than what you saw on the stat sheet during the game. So yeah, I think that's definitely one. That's probably going to be something we're going to be talking about just about every game there, because the Ohio State offensive line versus the Tennessee defensive line is probably going to be the single biggest matchup of the game in terms of who has to win in order for Tennessee to win. Well, the Tennessee defensive line needs to win. If the Ohio State offensive line wins, Ohio State probably wins the game. So that's definitely going to be one of the positional matchups that's probably right at the top of the list. One thing that I noticed was Tennessee adjusted really well to stuff in game. There was, in the first half, Tennessee had a really nice gain. They just kind of ran like almost a reverse with the receivers. It was like a little jet motion thing. And Jalen Milroe rolled left and just kind of flipped it to a receiver coming back the other way. It's sort of an iteration or a different version of what we've seen Ohio State run a few times with Jeremiah Smith this year. They tried that again in the second half, and Tennessee just swallowed it whole. It was like, okay, you got us once, the old fool me once, fool me twice. They did not get fooled again, to quote a former president. It was a sort of a microcosm of probably a pretty well-coached team. That Tim Banks is the defensive coordinator there for for Tennessee. I think they said on one of the broadcasts that he was a Penn State guy before that. I meant to look that up, but he's someone who seems like, okay, you can get me once, but we talked about this with the Ohio State against Michigan running that sort of pause option and then never went back to it. You can potentially go back to it, but you're going to have to maybe show something else. You're going to, you show something and then you have another play off of it so that, okay, they're looking for this now. Now you have to have what's the next step off of that, not just run it again.
I'm just looking now because I was surprised by this, and maybe I shouldn't be, but so Alabama started out the game 3 of 5 on third downs in the first quarter. They were then 0 for their next 9. They did not convert a third down after the first quarter. They were 0 for 4 in the second quarter, 0 for 2 in the third, and 0 for 4 in the fourth quarter. And you look at their fourth quarter drives when they're down a score or tied, and they desperately need something. They went 3 plays, 4 yards and out, 3 plays, -2 yards and out, 4 plays, 1 yard loss of downs. And that was the game basically. And then they had the one more possession at the end with about a minute to go, and Jalen Milroe goes and throws an interception. So the Tennessee defense, when they needed to, definitely stepped up. And this was right after giving up, they gave up some yards the first 3 possessions of the second half. They gave up 8 plays for 42 yards was the first drive out of the third quarter in Alabama, and it had to punt. Then it was 10 for 58, which was a field goal. Then it was 6 for 75, which was a touchdown. So the momentum had kind of shifted, and Alabama was starting to run the ball. They were protecting. They were looked like they were getting things done. And then Tennessee's like, no more of this. We're going to just go ahead and seal things up. And this is all the while, it's not like Tennessee's offense was doing much either. They did get a touchdown drive and an 8-yard field goal drive in that fourth quarter. But I was impressed the way Tennessee's defense they'd had enough. And they got after Milroe, as you said. And, these 2 games, and we're not going to get into Georgia here, but watching these 2 games, are you surprised at how much more teams are throwing against Tennessee than they are running? Because, and maybe some of this is just the RPO situation and, throws are actually runs and that sort of thing. But in this one, they threw the ball 45 times. They ran it 34. Georgia, it's a similar number with Carson Beck throwing it. But are you surprised, and do you think that will continue against Ohio State time when we know you got to establish the run? Do you? Do you?
Do you really? And this is a game that Alabama lost. I think Alabama would have loved to run the ball. They just couldn't during this game. They had 34 carries for 113 yards. And they, part of that is Jalen Milroe.
You got to take the losses off of there.
Yes. Yeah. Part of, oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. 34 for 75. Sorry. Yeah. So, they really, over the course of the game, really didn't run the ball at all. The halftime stats, I wrote this down, the halftime stats in the first half, they threw for 120 something yards and they ran for 14, Alabama, in the first half. And right after the half, that 8-play, 42-yard drive, it was all runs. It was just 8 runs in a row. It was very clearly, we are going to establish it. And they got it from deep in their own end, kind of out to midfield, and ended up punting it away. But you take that out, 8 plays, 8 runs for 42 yards, take that off of 34 for 75. That's more than half of you basically ran for a yard a carry outside of that. And yeah, some of it's sacks, but okay, congratulations. Then you ran for 2 yards a carry outside of that, sack adjusted. They just could never get the run game going. And, I think a lot of that is a testament to Alabama's offensive line not being great, Tennessee's defensive line being very good, and Tennessee being pretty aggressive on defense because they put their corners out on an island quite a bit over the course of the game. And they're going to let those safeties get into the box. You're going to let the safeties be a part of the run fit. And I wonder, you look at this from Ohio State's perspective. It's like, well, Ohio State's going to have to throw the ball to win. Tennessee probably also knows that Ohio State's going to have to throw the ball to win. You look at Ohio State coming off of a game where they didn't throw the ball much and people complained about the fact that they ran the ball too much. And after the game, Ryan Day sort of acknowledged, probably ran the ball too much. If anything, you're probably going to overcorrect and throw the ball more. So guess what? Tennessee probably knows that. I do wonder how similar, both from the personnel are different, but also you sort of know that Ohio State's game plan is probably going to be, you got to throw the ball, use your playmakers. and win the ball, move the ball through the air, hit some big plays through the air, because it's there. Both teams had stuff there through the air, and it was just, boy, if you love dropped passes, oh boy, do I have the game for you. It was a mess. Both teams dropped a bunch of passes. It was just, and if you can't throw the ball downfield and you can't run the ball, like, then yeah, that's going to limit you quite a bit. And Alabama moved the ball somewhat, but it was always a little disjointed. They couldn't run the ball at all. To me, if I'm Tennessee, I don't go in with the same game plan they went into this game with. I look at, well, maybe you keep the safeties back. Maybe you're playing a little bit more of a too high shell and make Ohio State be methodical and go down the field and beat you. They might be able to, but I don't think the Tennessee's game plan is going to be nearly as aggressive in terms of stopping the run as it was against Alabama.
That third quarter drive you're talking about, 8 runs on, move the ball. They got the ball at their own 6-yard line. They ran the ball 8 times, get it out to their own 48. It's 4th and 1. And so what does Alabama do? They said, well, let's just punt it. Yeah, we're averaging 6-7 yards per carry on this drive, and we've really established something, and we've taken control of this game that we were trailing, or that is what, we're leading 7-0 at that point. And you know what? Let's just play it safe. And they punt it back, and Tennessee drives right down the field for a 91-yard touchdown drive in 1 minute and 54 seconds on 7 plays. Like this was an opportunity to keep the ball, continue to establish the run, and Tennessee forced a decision there, and they punt, and they turned that right around and basically grabbed the controller, grabbed some momentum right away. But then Alabama goes in and answers with a field goal drive, and I think there are some decisions made throughout this game that could have been better for Alabama. And boy, the left tackle and right tackle, and everybody loves to talk about Alabama's offensive line recruiting. Freshmen and redshirt freshmen and young players on the offensive line are almost always going to make mistakes, and these guys made a ton of them.
There was just a lot of pressure, just a lot. One of the reasons you can't run the ball is because you've got guys in the backfield constantly. And one of the reasons your quarterback looks like he's running for his life is because there's guys in the backfield constantly. That was definitely the case kind of throughout the game. And it goes back to to what we talked about with how good the Tennessee defensive line feels like they are overall, especially Pierce. He just looks like he's going to be someone who Ohio State fans are going to go, that guy again at some point during that game. That is really, to me, still the biggest question for Ohio State. You mentioned the game, some of the kick and go decisions from Kalen DeBoer. Josh Heupel had a couple where none of these are clear cut. Yes, that's an absolutely Kirk Ferentz level terrible decision, but punted from the 4th and 6 from the plus 41 with about 10 minutes left in the game. They were down 3 at that point. So that's one of those where, if Alabama gets the ball and goes right down the field and chews up 7 minutes and scores a winning touchdown, everyone points at that and goes, why'd you do that? He also, Tony, maybe more interesting to me was they had a chance to just ice the game right at the end. It was 4th and 3, and it was one of those moments where all you got to do is you got to pick up a first down, pick up 3 yards, and the game's over. You can run out the clock. Their kicker missed his first 2 field goals. Both of them were longer. Both of them were over 50 yards. He had a chance to ice the game on a 4th and 3, ended up sending his kicker back out there. And think about Ohio State fans, how you would have felt if Ryan Day had a chance to ice the Michigan game and they trot Jaden Fielding back out there after he'd missed a couple. Fieldings were both in the 30s to 40 range, so these were a little longer. But, Tennessee's kicker, is not great. Max Gilbert is their kicker. He started the year 11 for 12 on field goals. They put that graphic up, I think it was during this game. And then finished the year 8 for 13, missed a 53-yarder and a 50-yarder against Alabama. He's just a redshirt freshman. And, you go on the road, loud environment, hostile crowd, cold weather. I don't know that either team is feeling great about kicking field goals in this one. So that may change some of that 4th down decision-making a little bit. One other quick note on the special teams from Tennessee, Josh Turbeville is their kickoff guy. He's a different kicker than their place kicker. Turbeville had 66 touchbacks on 78 kickoffs this year. Just for comparison, Fielding had 52 touchbacks on 75 kickoffs. So you're going to see a lot more Probably very likely, unless if Tennessee's not kicking the ball out the back of the end zone, then it's probably a strategic thing rather than the kicker doesn't have the leg to get it there.
Yeah, and Max Gilbert was one of 3 on field goals in this game. The next game after this that Tennessee played was Kentucky. He was 0 for 3 in that game. Tennessee fortunate to win 28-18 in that one. I want to talk about Nico Iamaleava, who in this game, contrasting from the Georgia game, which we'll talk about in the next show, he went downfield quite a bit in this one. 7, he was only 7 of 17 on throws, 10 or more yards downfield, and I think he was like 2 for 7 on throws of more than 20 yards downfield. He was 7 of 10 on anything under 10 yards, which you should be. But he took some shots and he had some receivers, and they weren't connecting in this one. He was trying a few times, and it just wasn't there. And you look at the receivers, and you know some of the names. Everybody I think knows Brew McCoy because of his history of college football. But overall, they've got the guy that averages 25 yards a catch, but he only has 25 catches on the season, I think, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know that there's anybody really there that Ohio State should be like, there's no Ryan Williams, there's no Jeremiah Smith, of course, but there's no Cornell Tate. I don't think there's no, a guy that is an all conference, all American, certainly, that you would need to be hyper focused on. I think these are guys that they've seen before in terms of where would you put these guys, because they're not ahead of Oregon. And I'm going to say this, and people, especially the Tennessee fans, might get a little upset, and I appreciate that. Are they ahead of Indiana?
They're probably in that conversation. And I mean, I think Ohio State just hasn't really faced, outside of Oregon, any great wide receiver units this year. And that's going to continue in this game. I mean, Dante Thornton's the guy who is the big downfield threat, 25 catches, 647 yards, 6 touchdowns, 25.9 yards per catch. My advice to you would be to not let him catch the football if he's going to get 26 yards every time he does it. But yeah, Brew McCoy, second leading receiver on the team, 432 yards. And just to put those numbers in some context, Jeremiah Smith, 934 yards, Emeka Egbuka, 743 yards, Cornell Tate, 583 yards. Cornell Tate is the number 3 wide receiver, 583 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's 150 more yards and 2 more touchdowns than Tennessee's second wide receiver, and he's the third guy for Ohio State. So, I think that's part of it. And you look at, that's part of the issues with Tennessee's passing game. The other issue with Tennessee's passing game is Nico Iamaleava is like the most extremely talented young quarterback that you will see. And I say that like he is extremely talented. Mm-hmm. He is also the most young quarterback that Ohio State's probably seen this year, where he has a big arm. He wants to air it out. He overshoots a bunch of stuff downfield. He overshot a bunch of stuff downfield in this game. Then he threw behind someone at one point. And the receiving core is just not that good. They mentioned on the broadcast at one point, Squirrel White was tied at that point in the season for the most drops of any SEC receiver. He had 8 drops at that point in the season, and it's the third Saturday in October. So you've got, he's got plenty more weeks for him to drop more passes. We'll see how many more he drops after that. But at one point in this game, Iamaleava is getting taken down in the backfield and just kind of like flung it out to a running back in the flat. It was a lateral, which means like when it bounces, it's a fumble. But his knee was down, so it ended up not happening, and it ended up kind of working out where the running back, scooped it up and ran. But it was just, you remember there was a play, Will Howard did that in one of the early games this year, and everyone's like, what are you doing? And, Will Howard after the game went, yeah, that was really stupid. I'm not going to do that again. But Iamaleava just constantly is like, no, I got this. Like sometimes you can tell this is someone who has always been the most talented player on every football field he's ever played on for his entire life. And he just kind of has that, no, I got this. Like, I got it. And there's another one later in the game where He's get flushed out of the pocket. Alabama gets some pressure, flushes him out of the pocket. He's rolling left, which is against his body. And then one of the Alabama players hits him as he's throwing it. He throws it into double coverage. And it was like, no part of this was a good decision. Like none of this was even remotely well thought out. But it's just, that's what a young quarterback's going to do. He just looks like he's going to be someone who just tries to do too much sometimes, which, again, that's common for young quarterbacks. In a big game on the road, you're going to probably be trying to do too much again. And Ohio State, it's just up to Ohio State to, number one, get pressure on him. Number two, bring him down in the backfield, because once he gets out, once he breaks the pocket, you've got to rush the passer with a lot of discipline. You get behind him. We've seen Ohio State defensive ends get behind the quarterback before. And, not particularly talented runners, Dylan Raiola, Drew Aller, pick up long runs. They need to be so disciplined with their rush, because you see Iamaleava get out there and he runs and he's got real long legs and he just kind of glides down the field. And it's just like, wow, that felt like he ran 13 yards and somehow he got 30. He is going to be dangerous with his legs. Speaking, Tony, of people who are dangerous with their legs, we have to talk about Dylan Sampson. You mentioned Jalen Milroe was a problem, and like Jalen Milroe is one of those guys who like Jalen Milroe is a problem, and it's like both teams are like, yeah, he is. Both Alabama and Tennessee, like, yeah, he could be a big problem. Dylan Sampson is a problem. He is a really good running back. One of the things that, he was out for a good chunk of the first half of this game. I think he only maybe had like 5 or 6 carries in the first half. As soon as he came back, and it wasn't just Iamaleava having to kind of just make it up, he hit some big runs, forced Alabama probably to dial back their pass rush a little bit, because then it's not just the quarterback's going to throw it so you can rush the passer. They're in 3rd and long so you can rush the passer. He keeps them on schedule. He presents a really legitimate running threat. Stopping him really is like job one as far as defending the Tennessee offense. He had just a couple. He looks like he's bottled up. He looks like, oh, they've got him, and then boom, slides out the other side and just picks up the first down. He had, what did he finish this game with? 26 carries, 139 yards, couple touchdowns, long of 36. If he runs for 5.3 yards per carry against Ohio State, that gets Tennessee a long way. I'm sort of expecting this to be a relatively low-scoring game. I don't think this is getting into the mid-30s. So if he runs for 5 yards a carry and a couple touchdowns, which is absolutely possible, that gets Tennessee like at least half, maybe 2/3 of the way to the number of points they need to score to win the game. So that Ohio State finding a way to contain him, control him, just control Tennessee's run game, whether it's Dylan Sampson running the ball or Iamaleava scrambling or, on design runs. If you can control Tennessee's run game, you can kind of control Tennessee's offense. If not, then you're going to have a long, uncomfortable evening.
Yeah, and Sampson was only stopped in the backfield once. 1 carry for a loss of 1 on a 3rd and 5 play. And other than that, like you said, he's keeping them on schedule. Now, there are some no gains and some 1s and 2s, but overall, like, he did have a log of 36, but this isn't, his 139 yards aren't buoyed by an 82-yard run. He's very, very solid. He's physical. He scored twice in this one. I think a lot of people, maybe Ohio State fans, Tennessee, they're just going to throw the ball all over the place. They ran the ball 43 times. They threw it 28. And so that's, 62%, rough math in my head, a total guess, of throwing the ball to running it. And that's, they're running the ball to throwing it. And that's a lot of Dylan Sampson. But Nico Iamaleava, 10 yards a carry when you take away sacks, like he will run the read option and he will keep it. He will scramble and look 4 yards, and he can certainly escape and get free then, and either look downfield for somebody breaking free or just go ahead and pick up 6 yards or whatever. And he had a long of 27 yards in this one. So even getting sacked 3 times, he still averaged 5 yards a carry, which tells you how effective he can be once he gets through that first wave. And so, yeah, that's definitely something Ohio State is going to have to be aware of. And like if Dylan Raiola can rush for 47 yards against you, then then Nico can go for twice that and look good doing it. So they're going to have to be very, very aware of what he does in the ground game. And it's not just those two, but it's mostly those two. And frankly, if you stop Dylan Sampson, then I think you're going to be feeling pretty good. Although I don't know what stopping Dylan Sampson means. Is it 25 for 70? I think that's a stop.
If Dylan Sampson's at 3.5 yards a carry, you're probably feeling pretty good about your chances in the game, because it feels like he's such an important part of what they do. And if he can't run, then you do potentially get to the first of all, you're off schedule. So then you're looking at 3rd and 7s and 3rd and 6s where it's a little more predictable, and you can run into some issues with pass pro for Tennessee. And also, just if you can make Iamaleava throw the ball, Tennessee would prefer to run the ball. You said 62% as a ballpark. You were way off. 60.5%, Tony. I'm going to be kind and round that up to 61, but obviously it's somewhat embarrassing for you, but it's okay. It just very clearly Tennessee wants to run the ball. That's what they want to do. And if you can take away what they want to do and make them win a different way, then that's going to probably go a long way towards helping that happen. One quick thing on the quarterbacks. Tennessee finished 14 of 28. Iamaleava was 14 for 27. He got knocked out. He hurt his hip on one play. Gaston Moore came in, and boy, do you remember the Leroy Jenkins clip, Tony?
Yes.
It was the most Leroy Jenkins, like, well, I'm in here. It's only going to be one play, but man, I'm going to get my name in the box score. And boy, howdy did he. It was just one of the most ill-advised, like poorly thrown, basically threw it like you're playing 500 on the playground at recess. And it got intercepted by one of Alabama's defensive backs, but only because it didn't get intercepted by the other Alabama defensive back that was also there in pretty good position to intercept it. So, Iamaleava takes a lot of shots, and that's kind of part of, trying to extend plays and trying to do too much is you end up running around in the pocket. You end up running downfield. I don't think I ever saw him slide. I think he is generally going face first into life. And that's the kind of thing that adds up over the course of the season. Now, you've had a couple weeks off, so it's probably not as big of a concern now, but he takes some shots. And if he goes down, I have a sample size of one play for what the Tennessee offense looks like when he goes down. But, he was one of the early poster boys for NIL and the importance of, boy, if you could just get the right quarterback. But I don't think the Tennessee offense is going to look the same if he's not in there. And he, like I said, takes some risks and takes some shots.
I will say the backup quarterback Gaston Moore, who did throw the interception, he has a hell of an arm because he's on the move. He's rolling right, and he zipped that thing into coverage. It's like, yeah, it's a bad throw, but still, physically, it's pretty impressive. So, it's Joe Milton-esque in many ways, if you will. Former Tennessee quarterback, which I'm sure the Vols fans remember. Ohio State fans remember him as well as a former Michigan quarterback and former Tennessee quarterback. A couple of last things that I have in terms of we've talked about, and the people talk about the splits of the wide receivers for Tennessee, and they're out past the numbers. Sometimes they'll have two guys out there, way out there, trying to spread out the defense. They do throw a ton of slants on that. So it's like the receivers come back into the defense, but they have a lot of room to do that. And so that'll be something to watch. And then my last point here is, and I've got it to all these crazy notes. I don't know, you see all this stuff. One of the things I have like circled and starred is Ohio State better rotate on the defensive line this time. And they did not do it against Michigan. And I will say, I think Josh Heupel will be patient enough to just run the ball a lot like Michigan did in terms of 3 yards is plenty. 3 yards is plenty. Eventually you'll soften them up and you'll get more, but you're going to want to rotate the defensive line because they are going to run tempo. They'll snap the ball at times with 28, 30 seconds on the clock. And so you're going to have to help them out when you can. When it's an incompletion, they'll even go do some tempo on incompletion. So they're going to try to wear Ohio State down. And by the fourth quarter, you can't have JT Tuimoloau and Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams and Jack Sawyer gearing up for their 60th snap of the game.
Yeah, you're going to have to keep those guys fresh. And some of that's going to be the Ohio State offense has to do its part. I mean, the Ohio State defense kept Michigan scoreless for the entire game outside of a 3-yard drive and a 2-yard drive that were set up by a bad special teams play and a bad offensive play. But then at the end of the game, they gave up a long drive where they got an interception in the end zone. But then the offense goes 3 and out, and the defense has to go right back out there after giving up a long drive. And then they give up 3 points, and they missed like one tackle all game. And it was right there at the end when it's like, yeah, you're probably tired because you've been forced to play the last essentially quarter. So yeah, Ohio State's going to have to rotate more because otherwise you're gonna get in those spots in the fourth quarter where you're going to get tired. You're not going to be overwhelmed with heat or anything like that, but you're going to get tired because Tennessee is going to just lean on you as much as they can. The splits, I think we probably set a record for the Tennessee 101 thing that made it the longest into the show without talking about their splits and where they have their wide receivers lined up. Like you said, outside the numbers, that puts you in a spot where it's very hard to disguise coverages because, you want to have a safety over one of the outside wide receivers and then, bring pressure for him. Like, congratulations, he's coming from like the parking lot to bring pressure. So you're really sort of, you got to kind of declare your intentions at that point. So that certainly creates a little bit of a challenge. Something else, Tony, that would create a challenge was if this game was played in Neyland Stadium, because boy, it seemed loud there. And
Wow.
Alabama had all kinds of trouble with snaps, crowd noise. Kirk Herbstreit on the selection show talked about the fact that Ohio State might have been better playing in Neyland Stadium. Like, no. You go sit in the corner and you don't get to talk about football for 6 days. Go. Stop. No. Bad. Great. Go. It's the idea that you would be better off going on the road to play in a loud, hostile environment with an offensive line that Tony, we all saw the Danny Cannell tweet a couple weeks ago, so it's not literally the stupidest thing that's ever been said about college football this year, but it's in the conversation. And what made it even funnier was after Tennessee missed their second field goal the first half, Tony, do you know what the fans did? They booed, Tony. You're not going to believe it. But other fan bases, sometimes when things are going poorly in an important game, will boo their own team. Tony, it's the first time I'm hearing about this, but, listen, I'm not Kirk Herbstreit, so I don't know as much as he does, apparently.
Well, clearly. But, if there's booing at Neyland, then maybe this is good for Tennessee that they're going to be playing in Ohio Stadium because there will be no booing of Tennessee there. And I don't know how all that math works, but I guess Tennessee is fortunate to be playing on the road if they face some boos. And yes, even when Ryan Day, that statement was brought up to him on Sunday or whatever, he laughed and not like hilarious. It's like, that's dumb. That's dumb. And he's like, yeah, it's like, if you've coached at Ohio State or played at Ohio State for more than 3 games in your entire life, you've been booed by the Ohio State fans. If you've gone 3 and out more than once in a game, you're getting booed. Like, this is welcome to life in the big city, as Urban Meyer would say. So there you go. 1 game in. We've got plenty more coming. We'll be back with the loss to Georgia next. It's a different game, different attack, and we'll get to that one. So if you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Hit the bell to be notified when we drop the next video of the things that we've learned from watching Tennessee football. And, I'll just say this. I've watched Tennessee football for decades. One of my favorite teams. I can go back to Chuck Webb, Reggie Cobb of the late 80s, early 90s, Chuck Webb, Toledo Macumber, a Northwest Ohio great, beloved, and Peerless Price, an Ohio product, if I recall, from back in the day. And of course, as we all know, Tennessee cheated in 1995 with their cleats. If you'd like to give us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast platform of choice, that would be fantastic. And of course, you can always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up, become a member. We will be talking about this game and anything that happens afterwards all month and winter long. So find us there, BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month, just $4.99. Sign up, say hello to us there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.